My favorite thing of playing Final Fantasy games one after another is being able to point out the many references that these do to the previous installments, especially the specific ones, not just very generic ones that repeat through the series. And to celebrate Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles, a modern release of the game, we'll check the ones found in the original. Mind you, this is based on the PlayStation 1 release minus exceptions, so I can't guarantee what this remaster will include or even add to it, but I know it's something I'll be looking out for. Final Fantasy Tactics has a special side quest in the game that will be our goldmine for this video to find references to past games of the series. And these are the errands or propositions. When you visit any bar at the different cities, for example, one of the options our bartender friend will give us is to hear a proposition of a side job that increases our adventure rank, and learn about the lore of Ivalice. Mechanically speaking, this means that we have to send 1 to 3 of our generic party members to a different journey for a set amount of in-game days, and come back to this place to check the report and receive the rewards. Among these rewards, besides logical experience and money, there's 2 possible categories that we care about: wonders and artifacts. One focuses on places discovered and the others on treasures found. And these are all going to be full of references we are going to show here. To establish an order, I'll go game by game, so we'll start with Final Fantasy 1. While the wonders and artifacts are more common, sometimes there are references in the job itself, whose description help you find more about the lore of this world. And some still make specific callbacks, like the errand Girl at Gulg Volcano. Mount Gulg is the location from the very first game, most specifically a volcano that serves as a fire dungeon of the game, and where you fight one of the 4 Fiends of Chaos, Marilith. The description and report for this job talks specifically about being a volcano too. And there's a handful of wonders you can unlock from these jobs. Shrine of Chaos, for example, alludes to the first dungeon of the game, where you initially fight Garland to save Princess Sarah at the start of the game, but later also works as the final dungeon when you revisit it and travel 2000 years in the past. The next wonder will be Matoya Cave, a place described as home for an old magician feared for his power. This place exists in Final Fantasy 1 as it's also the home of the sorcerer Matoya, an old lady that will live with her sentient brooms sweeping around, and will be an ally to the party. It's a pretty charming place with one of the best tunes of the game, and she even made a return in Final Fantasy XIV. The next one will be the one called Castle of Trials. The description will mention some things from a later entry, but the name itself is a callback to FF1, most specifically to the Citadel of Trials. Also known as the Citadel of Ordeals, is a special dungeon you can access to after obtaining the crown, to test the party by going through different rooms with teleporters. At the end of this dungeon, the key item obtained will be referenced later too. The next wonder found is the Mirage Tower. The picture and description along it show this place to be in the middle of the desert, and thanks to the magic around it, is faintly seen as a mirage. This is in allusion to the location with the same name in FF1, as this is located in the middle of the Yanikurum Desert or the Great Eastern Desert. In this game, this is a dungeon you access after traveling with the airship into the peninsula around the desert, and at the very end of this place, we'll gain access to the next dungeon that will also be our next wonder. In the original Tactics, this will be called the Floating Castle, described as a place built by an entity known as Winged Ones, which disappeared in the past after an event called Cataclysm, so it's some form of ancient technology. The allusion is to the dungeon Flying Fortress, which is another name to call this dungeon, home of the Wind Crystal and of the boss fight against Tiamat, the last of the 4 elemental fiends of chaos at this point. And the last one for Final Fantasy 1, one of the artifacts you can get in this game will be a rat tail, described as an item that has use for magical medicine and it's tasty apparently. This key item appeared in different games eventually, but originally it's what you obtained at the before mentioned Citadel of Trials. That serves you to upgrade your job classes into the superior form by giving it to Bahamut at his lair. Moving on into Final Fantasy II, we have a couple of wonders about it. The first one will be the Semit Falls, a location described as part of a certain Palamesian empire, and even mentions how within this waterfall you can find mithril, material that is useful to fuel airships. This location shares the same name with the one in Final Fantasy II, but not only that, In this game, this is a dungeon that you get into with the objective to obtain Mithril, so we can have access to the same technology used by our enemy, the Paramecian Empire. So the description is pretty accurate in this case. And the other one will be the one called Pandemonium, described as a former capital of Paramecian Empire, surrounded by mountains, and even the detail that the only way to reach the city is through a corridor that passes through hell. As metal as this sounds, this is accurate to the location in Final Fantasy II. Pandemonium is final dungeon of the game that you access to it through the Jade Passage. And we can see how this castle from hell emerges from underneath to replace the Paramecian castle in the middle of the mountains. There will also be one artifact that alludes to this game, known as the Minu Orb. The picture resembles a Magatama jewel, and it's called like that because it contains the soul of the first magician, Minu. This last bit might be also an illusion, because Minu is a playable character of Final Fantasy II, the princess advisor and a reliable ally that specifically is a white mage, making him the first playable magician of the series with an actual name. So maybe that's what they meant by being the first magician. Moving into Final Fantasy III, we first have a couple of runs that will have callbacks to this game that focuses on airships mainly. The job run as straight will talk about the trading ship known as the Enterprise, and to attempt to salvage the goods there, and the description after will talk a little bit more of it. The Enterprise is the first ship you obtain in FF3. It gets gifted to you by the Vikings to sail the seas at first, but could even be upgraded into the first airship by Sid. The idea of salvaging ships with iconic names will be a common thing with the runs, and sometimes not even ships originally, like how there's a mission about salvaging the trade ship called Doga. This still is a callback to FF3, not to a ship but rather to a supporting character in the game called also Doga, a powerful wizard that lived for many years and is linked to Unei and the antagonist Xande. But for some reason here he is a trade ship now. For the wonders found, first there are a couple of villages, starting with Tosa's village, described as a village of dwarves called Lilliputians. And this can be accurate as the town in FF3 called Tosus it alludes to is one you reach after having the mini status, so it is a pretty tiny village, home of the gnomes. And another town found with the wonders is called Falkabird, a village where magic swordsmen hide. The allusion is the town in Final Fantasy III called Falkabird, an optional village of Dark Knights. The description in Tactics talked about magic swordsmen that shorten their lifespan by using his powers, but the accurate term is in fact Dark Knight, as this is a job in Final Fantasy where you deal damage by sacrificing your own HP, so the callback is more specific. The next wonder is a more iconic location of the series, the Crystal Tower. The lore description here will make another reference, but it's overall an imposing structure representing power and wealth. This is clearly an allusion to the final dungeon of Final Fantasy III with the same name, a place very iconic, known for its length and difficulty, that made it all the way down to Final Fantasy XIV. Funny enough, when you first enter the Crystal Tower, you can unlock another place with a certain key, and that will also be a wonder here. The Forbidden Land Eureka, once a prosperous capital, but now a ghost town and memory of its past glory. Eureka, the Forbidden Land, is a place you reach through the Crystal Tower. It's actually an optional dungeon to get the best equipment, unlocked by having the Eureka key from Doga and Unei. In the Famicom version, you can even unlock Ninja and Sage here, which are among the most iconic jobs for this game. And lastly, while there's not an artifact that is specifically a callback to FF3, if you read the description of all the materials you find, which, spoilers, of course will be mentioned later, they all talk about the lore of an ancient magic city called Saronia. That name will be the reference to the Kingdom of Saronia, one of the biggest towns of these games because there will be many sections to visit around the castle. This place is home of Princess Alus, and where you'll fight Garuda, who is controlling the king for his malicious intentions. For Final Fantasy IV, there are a couple of errands linked between them that tell a story based on the plotline of this game. For example, the errand Letter to Amor will have a certain bard called Edward to ask to deliver a letter to his beloved in Wargilis. The descriptions after mention that the princess of Wargilis, Anna, is in love with the poet Edward, or Gilbert, as this is his original name. All of this, of course, is a retelling of the love story between Edward and Anna in Final Fantasy IV, as she escaped her father and hometown to stay with her beloved and marry him, the Crown Prince of Damsian. These errands get cute because, after doing the job True Romance requested by Anna, we get the information that Anna announced her marriage to the poet, and wishing all the happiness of the world. This is cute because in Final Fantasy IV, unfortunately, tragedy struck upon them, so now in this other life, they could live happily ever after at least. Now for the wonders, first I have to mention that in the previous ones shown, there were descriptions of the Kingdom of Baron and the pilots called Redwing. Both of these are about the first nation in Final Fantasy IV, Baron, where the protagonist Cecil lives, as he is the general of the military air force called the Red Wings. And the wonder that is a location from Final Fantasy IV is Tower of Babel, a legendary tower that reaches to heaven from deep underground. There's also the mention of the term Giant's Tower. In FF4, the antagonist Golbez collects all the 8 crystals, 4 of them underground, to summon the Tower of Babel from beneath to reach the moon and summon from there the Giant of Babel, a creation by the Lunarians to destroy the human race on the planet. For the artifacts, there will be 2 of them. The first one is called Lugue, despite this weird name in the original translation. It's shown as a popular marionette with a particular design. The name is an allusion to Dr. Lugue, a mad scientist working for Golbez and doing malicious experiments, responsible for turning Edge's parents into monsters. And the design of the treasure refers to the transformation he suffers during his boss-fight. After defeating his Frankenstein-like creation Barnabas, he turns into this weird cyborg version of himself. And the last one is Calcovrina, a traditional dress-up doll popular among girls back then. If this doll looks a little bit creepy, it's because it's based on the FF4 boss fight with the same name. Calcabrina were a bunch of dolls that belonged to the little girl dwarf called Luca, but they got a little bit creepy and fight us, even turning all together into this version that resembles the artifact picture. And finally, there is a special mention outside of errands, because as we talked before about Edward, in the first fight against Wigraf, there is the chance that this dialogue occurs, where he says, "No spoony bard could spin a sweeter tale." This is also a classic reference because in Final Fantasy IV, when you first find Edward, Anna's father, Tela, will lash on him, attacking him and screaming at him, and the most iconic line in this moment was in fact calling him a spoony bard. On to Final Fantasy V, there is a wonder that alludes to a location, which was previously mentioned in the lore of some of the others before, as they are the Ronkan ruins, described as part of the Ronkan Empire that cover the whole world but no longer exist, with an empty castle floating around. In FF5, the Ronka ruins exist as they are ancient remains of an ancient civilization known as the Ronka, who built this floating city to be closer to the sun. And we get to reactivate the ruins and get into them to proceed with our adventure, fighting the machinery around and reaching the Earth Crystal. For the artifact, we'll be able to find the sword Excalibur, described as an imitation of the legendary sword Excalibur, and despite being a copy, is still cherished. This sword first appeared in FF5 as a special event along Gilgamesh. When you encounter him at Castle Exteth, he will mock you that he got the legendary sword before us in the room, thinking it was Excalibur, and at the end of the fight, will proceed to attack continuously to little effect before being vanished. That's because he didn't get the legendary sword, but rather a fake copy called Excalibur, that we later get as reward. Another special mention here. There will be at the end of a special dungeon called Deep Dungeon the opportunity to recruit a monster as part of the group. This monster is called Bivlos, a demonic looking creature with horns, and it will inexplicably assist the party in the battle against Elidivus. This is an allusion to Final Fantasy V, as the monster called Bivlos, who look pretty similar in design, was the boss fight at the Library of the Ancients, where monsters appear from different books. It's a little bit of a weird appearance, but these are my favorite ones. Going into Final Fantasy VI, we have a couple of runs that once again will focus on airships. Not only that, but there will also be mentions of the owner of this. That's because in runs like Wandering Gambler, the mention of a blackjack casino ship appears, but in the descriptions after completing it, the owner, Mr. Setzer, will be mentioned too, as someone who likes casino and gambling. Setzer, of course, playable character of FF6, owner of the blackjack airship, and known as the gambler even with his job class. So this is pretty on point. But it won't stop there for him. Some other job about salvaging a ship will lead us to discover the Falcon, a ship that sank during a storm. This is also an allusion to FF6, because in the second part of the game, Setzer uncovers this new airship called the Falcon, which belonged to his dear friend Daryl in the past, who disappeared after an accident with it. So we have both of the airships mentioned here. For the actual wonders, the first one found will be the one called originally Magic Train, but it's in fact the Phantom Train, a transport train to carry man-made demons known as the Carrier of the Dead. This alludes to the Phantom Train located in the Phantom Forest in FF6, a mysterious place that Sabine, Cyan and Shadow explore, filled with ghosts and where weird things happen. Not only at the end of it you fight the actual train as a boss fight, but also learn that its existence is to carry the soul of the dead to the afterlife, as we get to see Cyan's family aboarding it, leaving him behind. And the last wonder will also be called for some reason Magic Continent, but it's more accurate to call it Floating Continent, a place believed to be the gate to either heaven or hell. This is a reference to the Floating Continent in Final Fantasy VI, summoned by Emperor Gestalt and Kefka after controlling the Espers. This is where the warring triad, the gods of magic, reside and keep the world at balance. At least until a certain clown decides to mess with it. Finally, for Final Fantasy VII, we first have an errand that is going to be, of course, focusing on airships. The errand Destiny of the Company will talk about recovering the trade vessel, the Highwind. This is the name of the airship in FF7, owned eventually by our party member Sid Highwind. Originally, Shinra is in possession of it, but we get to steal it at the Junon harbor and escape with it, as the crew there apparently are Sid fanboys, so they are fine with that. There is also a job that mentions the term Black-Caped Man, which is how Sephiroth's copies are known as, and for the next reference we check the artifacts instead. Technically there are multiple of them, because you can find the red, blue, white and black materials in this game. The descriptions, as mentioned before, will talk about the lore of Saronia, but the item itself is of course a reference to the magic orbs in FF7, a special mechanic that allows you to use different magic or abilities according to which materia you have equipped on your weapons. There's even the white materia, which is lore relevant instead, as this is the one in possession of Aerith and only activated after her passing, to prevent Sephiroth's destruction with his own black materia. And of course, I have to finish this recap with the most obvious one, the presence of a certain Cloud Strife, protagonist of Final Fantasy VII and optionable playable character. The cute thing here is that his abilities are all based on his limit breaks on his own game. And the way to recruit him is also a reference to the start of FF7, as Aerith does a little cameo around as a flower seller. And now with the remaster there will be voice lines, so that's nice.
聞こえなかったのか。その汚い手を離せと言ったんだ。
Thank you very much for watching. As you made it this far, make sure to like and subscribe for more Final Fantasy if you want, and enjoy this new tactics game. Love you!